Hi, Jolyon.
Hey,
How are
so
you?
and hello everyone, and welcome to this first episode of a series that we're running at Enliven, um, that Natalie and I will be presenting, and it's around us as plain language practitioners sharing our knowledge of plain language and how it operates in the world or things that we're interested in. And the first episode today is on how we see medical and everyday language as separate dialects of English, which practitioners in all sorts of things, medicine included, council, human services, community services, need to think about their role as essentially a translator between their specialist language, which they need to use, and then um, everyday English. Um, and I guess it's helpful to understand how I come to this work. I've worked in equity based roles for a long time in education, um, in healthcare, with councils, all sorts of work. And that brought me to plain language, and it's something that I deeply believe in. Has an amazing role to play in equity practice and getting better outcomes for people who are statistically more likely to suffer worse outcomes when interacting with services. And Nat, what about you?
I've been working at Enliven now since 2020. So I've been in the plain language and health literacy space at Enliven for a little while. My background before that was in psychology, and currently I'm a final year medical student. So this work of plain language as a whole and this topic, I guess, of medical and everyday English is of particular interest to me because I am in the hospital sort of every day and am really seeing that the way that healthcare has, I guess, created a language that works for them, it helps healthcare professionals to communicate really succinctly with each other. How that also leaves the general public grappling with this terminology that's really unfamiliar and that does has been built up as sort of this distinct power between the people who understand the language and know how to use it and the people who sort of the language is directed to, the patients, the clients, the consumers, who are having to really work hard to understand what it is that someone means when they say this and what they're supposed to do with that information. So I'm really
Yeah,
excited for this whole series, but particularly that we're starting with this first one about medical and everyday English.
yeah. And I think the thing here is saying that, you know, those two languages are essentially dialects of English,
Mm-hmm.
that there's not a lot of crossover there.
Mm-hmm.
And that plain language and good plain language communication is the bridge between those two. Before we kick off fully, would like to pay my respects to um, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, where I'm working, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and just acknowledge the life that I have led on this country. I'm traditionally from New Zealand, um, and just that how much growth and how much of my life has occurred on this land that's been cared for generations and generations and continuing for Indigenous Australians and the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. And I think it's just important to also note with plain language, um, core tenet of plain language is that we write for the reader. And when we think about Indigenous Australians, there's a particular history um, of disempowerment. And I think that by respecting and co-designing and speaking in a language that Indigenous people understand is a really key equity practice.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so a little bit about us at Enliven, just to start off with. So we are part of a bigger organization called Each. So Each works across community health and sort of social health, and it's an organization that delivers services all across Australia. We at Enliven are one small but mighty part of that. So our team or our organization is led by our director, Silver. And our health literacy team, Jolyon and myself, are the coordinators. And we have the wonderful Tia who works across health promotion as part of our team as well. And we're really lucky to be supported across Enliven by a wonderful multicultural engagement network. So this is over 100 people representing more than 40 communities who work with us in co-designing, testing, and community engagement activities in the different communities that we work with. And so this series is one that Jolyon has started to really help to share some little insights into the work that we do in a really nice informal way, and for us to pick different topics that we're interested in to explore clear communication and plain language and how to do it really well.
Thanks, Nat. And I just like straight out of the gate, I'd like to say the world is more specialized than ever. And um, that specialization saves lives when we think of all sorts of different specializations. It allows people to heal and get better from diseases that were a death sentence or, um, in all sorts of ways. But every field develops its own language, its own assumptions, and its own shortcuts. And when an everyday person steps into that field, they cross into a world that wasn't designed for them at all. And this is not I just want to be upfront here. If you're a medical practitioner or someone who works in a specialized field, this is not about blaming you for that. Specialization is amazing. However, we do have an issue that when, that essentially specialized practitioners and everyday people are essentially speaking a different language.
Mm.
And what we really need to think about is what are we doing about that gap? So just a couple of examples to start off with. I mean, there's obvious words that, microdermabrasion, and that comes from television advertising, of course, when people are trying to sell you something. But there's also, I listened to my dad trying to speak about an anesthetist, which is the hardest word to say in the English language. The anesthesiologist is slightly easier, but listening to my dad stumble 3 times on that, having spoken English his whole life, is indicative of the obvious words that people can't understand. But I think there's also a second subset here where we get down to words like adequate, which seemingly looks pretty simple, but may actually have a specialist language connotation. So unremarkable, the same, non-compliant. I mean, essentially, there's 2 different languages. We've got the very obvious language, and then we just have these words which have an everyday meaning and a specialist meaning, which are particularly tricky and invisible.
And it makes it particularly hard for those ones, Jolyon, as well, because often when you're the health professional in that setting, because you're using quote unquote everyday language, you think that the meaning is easier for your patients to understand. So you might be good at explaining hypertension because you think, oh, that's a special word. They probably don't know what that means. But if I'm saying adequate, I sort of think, that's a word that's used every day. People know what I'm saying. So it can be even trickier in a way with these words because there's an assumption that we might have a shared understanding of what we're talking about. And as you can see here, we really often don't.
Awesome. That's exactly what's going on, I think, as you say. And look, it's not just health. It's Centrelink letters, it's NDIS plans, and it's also things like, processes that happen. The process of Medicare claims. I mean, I hate to think of many people in my life having to undertake that work. People learn, but some people are trying to do their whole life on a mobile phone. And so what's that process like for them? So there's a broader thing to think about, which is not just the words, not just that kind of thing, but largely the processes that we ask people to go through. So those, I mean, our main focus is probably health, but we can help with all sorts of different stuff. So I just want to address the elephant in the room, which is dumbing down. This is so often we hear variants of this. Maybe people don't say dumbing down. But essentially, what I want you to take away from this is that everybody prefers plain language, including experts. And there's like large scale meta studies on this. People prefer to understand, they prefer information that is accessible. And particularly if there's stress involved and they have to look at some documentation and make decisions, even people who are highly educated prefer that to have been pre-thought by the person who's written the information so that it's clear to them what decision they're making and what the information is. And there's like I'll in the notes I'll include this evidence. But if you're trying to make the case for plain language, this is a good place to start. Everyone prefers plain language. I think it's also important to talk in plain language because humans are excellent at hiding when they don't understand, even from their partners. They don't tell their children. And they certainly hide it from medical practitioners. So if the medical practitioner is printing out something that you've written and giving it to the patient, and then the person has a look at it, then they're likely to hide the fact that they don't understand it. So this is where we get onto something called the universal precautions approach to health literacy. Universal precautions comes from blood-borne viruses and worries about transmission, but it's been moved over into health literacy, which is our field, which plain language sits within. And that is just to say, don't assume that people understand. Assume they don't understand and communicate from that perspective. Communicate for the person who's least likely to understand. That's also the person who's probably least likely to get good outcomes from engaging with services. So think about it that way. This is a very good mindset to bring to your work. Would you say anything about that, Nat?
I think absolutely. And the thing that we see a lot is best case scenario, often in the hospital, is asking, do you understand? Or does that all make sense? And you've got to assume people aren't going to tell you when they don't understand. That icky feeling of being embarrassed that you don't understand, worried that you're taking up people's time, shame builds in there. There are so many different emotions that people feel. And we feel in other situations when we don't understand things. That feeling that you get means people aren't going to tell you that they don't understand. So it's having that mindset of what could be confusing here in words, in processes, in the ways that I'm setting documents out, in what I'm asking someone to do. Having those things in the forefront of your mind before you communicate, to take that load off someone, having to, admit that they don't understand to try and get the best outcome.
Awesome. And so again, what we're doing is we're translating, but we're translating to a specific level where we know that best odds are that an average person is going to be able to pick that up, an everyday person is going to be able to pick that up and understand what we're trying to communicate, what their options are, and what they need to do next. And so just a little bit more about readers. I mean, this is taken from one of the great texts of health literacy from the 90s, but this is still relevant. There's a difference between how skilled readers approach something they don't understand as opposed to less skilled readers. So they're reading the meta, like the skilled readers are reading the kind of whole context and they understand that context better. whereas less skilled readers are more likely to take things literally because they're not reading that context. Skilled readers read with fluency. Less skilled readers read slowly and miss the meaning. Skilled readers will go away and find out what something means if they don't understand. Less skilled readers will just skip over that word, and then that opens up risk because they haven't understood. And, skilled readers will persist through confusion, whereas less skilled readers will tire quickly and give up. And when we're thinking about this idea of translating from specialized language to plain everyday language, what we're doing here is we are trying to make it easier for less skilled readers so that they don't, take word literally, because we've already been very literal. They're able to read confidently. They won't miss the meaning because it's clear as day. They won't skip over words because there'll be a plain language version of that. They won't miss the context because we will have given sufficient context in understandable language, and they won't tire and give up quickly because the whole process of picking up that document will be like, oh, I feel confident that I can tackle this even just from the way it looks at first glance. And that was from 1996, but now it's even more complicated because you used to have a pamphlet. Now you've got a patient portal, consent forms, discharge summaries, automated text. People used to skip the word and move on. Now they're going to Google it or look it up on social media. In the past, they would give up and wait or talk to a family member who has their best interests at heart. Now they're searching and getting whatever the algorithm wants them to see, which may or may not be in their best interest. It's probably just more geared towards how long it can keep them engaged with that content. And then there's the meta again. There's this kind of process part where it's like, before it was a piece of paper in your hand. Now it's like, how do you even get to the correct information? All right, so Nat, I thought that we could do a little quiz. And the way that this will work is that we'll read out the questions and people can have a quick think about it while they're watching and think about what the answer is. So let's have a look. All right. So Nat, do you want to talk us through this?
Yes. So our first one is an example of an NDIS letter. So your plan has been deemed adequate and will not be subject to reassessment at this time. So take a few moments to have a think about, what does the participant most likely understand when they read that sentence? All right, we'll say we've had enough thinking time then.
Yep.
So for me, when I read this, I guess it comes into mind of, what does someone understand? And then what are the implications of that understanding? So I'm looking there at D. So the, I guess, worst case scenario then is that there are so many different words within that one sentence that someone might not understand. So deemed, not sure what deemed means. Adequate. I mean, adequate, the connotations for me is it's not good. It's, maybe barely okay. So they're working with deemed, they're working with adequate. And subject to. So you've got all of these little words or phrases that make something tricky. And then what are the implications of that? That someone just stops reading. They stop engaging with that. I've gotten one sentence in potentially for this letter, and I've just stopped. So that's sort of where I see the worst case scenario with that one there.
And for someone who doesn't have a good understanding of this kind of language, then again, it's an equity piece, isn't it? Next one. Yeah.
The poultry problem. So a patient on dialysis is told to avoid shellfish and poultry. When asked about the poultry, the patient confidently replies, I can have fried chicken, but never poultry. So what happened to this patient there? And we'll give you a few minutes to have a think about that.
We're going to give you 25 minutes to think.
Should have said a few moments. We'll give you a few moments.
Yeah, no, I think, take some time off for yourself.
Enjoy this one. Really sit in it. When I think about this one, honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is how good it is that someone is confident enough to reply to that, because we can tell in their reply in saying, I can have fried chicken, but never poultry, they haven't understood that the two sort of are talking about the same thing. But they're obviously confident and happy enough with the rapport that was built to be able to say that. So I think in a way that's the best thing that we can hope to happen. What's possibly more likely is that someone reads that shellfish, maybe they understand everything that comes in shellfish, but they may not understand that either. And poultry, if I read that and I'm not sure what poultry is, I'm probably just going to go away, feel a bit awkward about it, and not raise that in that session. So at least here, there's an opportunity to intervene before that person goes away. But more likely, they're not going to understand that, and they are just going to go home and eat the fried chicken because they haven't understood the link between the two. What are your thoughts there, Jolyon?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that this is the perfect example of more sophisticated readers have these umbrella terms that capture rich context. And, poultry is all different sized kinds of birds. And so more sophisticated readers probably have, understand what that means. Whereas just a reader with like less vocabulary maybe just doesn't understand. And then we get into that whole thing of whether or not they're actually going to tell you, or how they're going to find out what that means, or are they even going to question that, or are they just going to go on their assumption? Okay, so I'm going to move on now. And so we've quite often got the same words and different meanings, or we've got highly specialized words with their own meanings that people just don't understand. And what we want to say to people in health and human services is that you are the translator. You're the person who needs to make that specialized meaning accessible to the people you're interacting with. You're not dumbing this information down. You're translating between a complex dialect and everyday English and everyday language. And that's a big part of your role. And the better you get at this, the better that your audience will do. Some good practice are finding out what the community knows before you start out, and that will guide how you pitch your information and what's in there, what's at the top of that information. And while you're writing, you're going to apply universal precautions. And that just means that you will be thinking about who is the person who has the least capacity to understand this information, and you're going to write for them. But as we said, even highly educated people with a very sophisticated vocabulary prefer plain language. And then after you write, you're going to check your output with the community and find out, what do real people understand? And there's all sorts of ways that you can do this, from very formal to informal, but that's something to consider. So I did just want to finish off. Nat, do you want to chat about this a bit?
Yeah, so I guess we've talked a little bit about, plain language and why it's important today. And we just wanted to end with some of the different things that we at Enliven can do to support the type of work that you might be doing, whether it's medical, whether it's health, or whether it's in another field as well. So we do training. So we can train your team or across your organization to write in plain language. So to structure your documents, to write them well, and to test with readers as well. We do a lot of different document work. So we like this phrasing. So we can do the translation for you. So we can take what you've written and we can convert it to plain language. We can create documents from scratch, or we can just provide a review. You might just want to bounce some ideas off, hear our thoughts about what's working and what might need some improvement. So we can do that there as well. We do community testing. So this can come in at that sort of first part where you're thinking about your document, or it can come in at the end when you've got a finished piece and you want to see how it lands with the audience you're working with. So we've got a big multicultural community engagement network. So over 40 different multicultural groups are represented, and they can give you real feedback about your document. And we just wanted to finish there with evidence-based. So everything that we do is grounded in best practice and the latest research. And we have really deep connections with the communities that we work with. So this means that you're getting real feedback from the types of people who are going to be using your documents there. So yeah, we can do the work, and we can train you to do the work.
And do you want to tell me a little bit about the ISO standard?
Yeah, so there is now an international standard for plain language. So this has been around for a little while now, but it's still, people are still understanding a little bit more about it. Basically, it sets out globally agreed upon standards about what constitutes plain language writing and how to go about doing it. So this is something that we follow when we do document work. This is something that we teach to when we're doing training. And it's also something that we in Enliven were involved in creating. So we were part of the group that has created the standards. And they really make sure that when we're talking about plain language, other people in other areas, we're talking about the same thing and we're writing it in the same way. So it's not mandatory, but it's really great guidance to make sure that we're writing things in ways that work for the readers as well.
And in the coming years, you'll be able to become an accredited organisation in plain language through this standard as well, further down the track. And I just wanted to highlight here as well, for the people out there who are worried about accreditation through the various kind of standards that organisations have to meet, all of these are starting to include plain language in them. All of them are starting to have communication clauses or co-design clauses. And it's because it's good practice, and that's something that we can help you have great evidence for the good work that you're doing in making your services more accessible. So it's moving from a nice to have to a compliance requirement with funding attached. So yeah, just in summing up, what you can do is remember that you are translating. You're not dumbing down. You're doing someone the great kindness of removing stress from their day and helping them to understand what their choices are in a situation that could be quite stressful for them. Always use this universal precautions approach. Assume that you don't know who's struggling and that there are some people out there who will struggle to understand complex language, and so write for everyone in plain language. Find out what your non-specialist audience understand from what you write. Get a sense of how people take what you're writing. And remember, say the specific thing. Don't say poultry, say chicken. Don't say maintain adequate hydration. Say drink water regularly. Don't say attend your screening. Say come in for a blood test. Don't say engage in physical activity. Say go for a walk. Make it extremely concrete. I just want to say also the next episode of this series will be on how many cultures are in the room. So that's understanding what cultures are involved in written communications between organizations and people out there in the community. If you're wanting to follow Enliven, here's some of our social media and our contact details. And Nat, would you like to say anything before we finish up?
No, but thank you all for, I guess, tuning in to the first time we've had this discussion. We're really excited to keep making these informal videos to talk about topics that come up in our work and we know come up in the work of the communities that we support. Yes, thanks,
Yeah,
Jolyon.
and please feel free to comment, tell us any information that you're interested in, and we would love to make more content that meets your needs in
Mm.
helping your organization and your team, yourself, to communicate better in plain language.